Humidity is often the most ignored part of growing orchids, but it is crucial in ensuring healthy growth and amazing flowering out of your orchids. In fact, a lot of people land up killing their orchids with incorrect humidity levels. Welcome to the Nature Company. Today we're going to be explaining to you a little bit about humidity and how it affects your orchids, and give you some simple tips and tricks you can use to ensure you get the correct humidity levels so you can have thriving orchids. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Humidity levels are so important in growing your orchids that even if all your other growing conditions are ideal, your orchid's still not going to thrive. It's going to have problems, it's going to slow down its growth, it's going to look wilted, and what's going to happen is you'll land up with orchids with 2, maybe 3 leaves that are limp and almost withered, as opposed to orchids with 4, 5, 6 nice big firm plump leaves. And what will happen is your flowers will start to fade too quickly, you'll get malformed buds, and the buds will probably drop off early. So now that we've got you all afraid as to making sure your humidity levels are right, how do we go about it, and what are the right humidity levels for our orchids? Phalaenopsis particularly are some of the slightly more accommodating with regards to humidity levels. They'll grow in humidity levels anywhere from 50% up to 80%. 50% is generally on the quite low side. We'd like to try and keep it between 60% and upwards for vigorous growth and those longer lasting flowers. But you can still get away with that 50% and still get a good display without detrimenting your orchid. But what is it about this humidity that makes it so important for the orchids? Well, it's the moisture and the water it absorbs that is used to break down carbon dioxide, and that's what produces the energy for the plant itself to produce not only the food, but to help it grow. And without all that energy, you're going to have less vigorous plants, and of course, naturally then, fewer and less vigorous flowers. And now I can hear you all shouting, surely if they need moisture to break down that CO2, surely I can just water them more. We all know what the problems with overwatering are, but we'll get into the whole environment and why just pure watering isn't going to affect those changes that you want. As your humidity levels drop, so there's less moisture in the atmosphere. What is going to happen is you're going to get faster evaporation from your media itself, and you're going to get faster transpiration through the leaves. With Phalaenopsis having those broad, large leaves, opening up a very large surface area for transpiration to happen, they're going to need lots of moisture. And the roots may not be able to absorb as much moisture as they need if the humidity levels are low, because that evaporation straight out of the media, the transpiration and evaporation itself out of those leaves are going to be too fast for the roots to be able to absorb enough, meaning your plant will slowly dehydrate. And that's what will then give you those soft, limp, flaccid leaves, and the plant will start drawing energy out of those lower leaves, causing them to drop off. That's what will give you fewer leaves on your orchid as the humidity levels drop. Also, another big problem that can happen when it starts getting to this point is because all the moisture has been sucked out of the leaf, your leaf now has a high sugar content. And with those flaccid leaves, those thinner cell walls, and all those excess sugars, it's the perfect climate for fungal infections to take hold. And now not only are you battling with keeping your plant alive, you're battling with infection that's going to want to kill it too. So if my orchid is having a problem drawing up enough moisture from the roots for the leaves, can't I then just take my misting bottle and constantly mist my orchid. That way I'll be reducing the water stress. But in doing so, you're going to be landing up with water running down into your crown and in between the leaves, and you're going to start getting crown rot. So that's not going to be such a good idea when it comes to Phalaenopsis. What other ways can I go about increasing the humidity or reducing the water stress on my Phalaenopsis? So what we can do is we can try and increase the humidity levels. One of the ways we can do that is by having evaporation trays. We just have these small trays filled with pebbles or anything that will allow for water to be at the bottom and allow for your plant to sit on top of that without actually sitting in the water. And what can happen then is evaporation will take place from the water, allowing for that humidity to rise up around your plants. You can use any number of different ways. You can be creative and make them decorative, but they'll all give you a very similar result. By pouring in water, just enough that it's not over the tops of the pebbles or glass beads for the sake, and then you can just place your orchid above, and as your water evaporates, you can refill it. But sometimes in very large rooms, this is not necessarily enough to provide enough humidity for your plants. So what do? You need to try and reduce the air volume of the room. And by doing that, you can simply do that by closing doors or closing windows to allow for a smaller air volume that you are trying to humidify with your evaporation trays. Or another very efficient way of doing it is with humidifiers. These are quite cost effective nowadays, and they can go a long way in producing the humidity that your orchids need for the room. But again, if your rooms are very large, you may start having problems ensuring that you can get humidity to the whole room if your orchids are spread out throughout the room. So an idea might be is to congregate your orchids into one area of the room to allow that to be more humid than the rest of the room possibly. Also, as soon as you start increasing your humidity levels, you've got to ensure you have good air movement. So then a small little fan or something to keep that air movement blowing through so we don't have problems with stagnant, wet air around our plants that are going to bring in those diseases again. And also, if you have a large plant collection, if you do congregate them into one corner, you'll land up producing a very nice climate with all of them transpiring and breathing. Generally, your humidity levels are a lot higher in and around that small dome of plants, along with your temperatures. It generally provides an excellent environment for the growth of your orchids, but then you have to start being careful of how much light your orchids are then receiving in case they're being shaded by too many other surrounding plants, or the fact that your air movement may stagnate around it. So again, ensure that you have those little fans to ensure you're having the right air movement for your orchids. But invariably, plants do prefer being around other plants, but don't then go compact them all too closely together. Just give them that little bit of breathing space. They don't like to be lonely. We also have to acknowledge that in some climates, this is not necessarily going to work. The humidity levels are just too low for certain periods of the year, and you may have to use a physical dome or tent, generally made of something like polyethylene that you can remove and put back over, especially at specific times of the day or night where your humidity levels may be lower. This will help produce an environment on the inside that's going to have a high humidity because you've got a lower air volume again. That's going to build up heat and humidity that's going to be just right for your orchids. And now again, anything that's in an enclosed space like that, whether it's those polyurethane tents or those grow cupboards Or even if you've got your plants closely packed together, always understand that you have to keep a very vigilant eye on pests and diseases. Because of these close, closed environments, these pests and diseases can be spread incredibly easily from one plant to the next. So always be vigilant. When it comes to heating or cooling your home, you've also got to be particularly careful and aware of your orchids, because those heaters and air conditioners draw all the moisture out of the air, leaving very, very low humidities indoors. And this is going to dry out your plants incredibly quickly. Not only are those hot or cold drafts going to be bad for your orchids, but they're also going to absorb the moisture straight out of the plant, straight out of the media, and your plant is going to dehydrate faster than ever before. So if you do have to use them, ensure that you do have some sort of device to be able to supply more moisture to the air, whether it's a humidifier or those evaporation trays, which may not necessarily be enough in those sort of conditions. You may have to get hold of a hygrometer to ensure that your humidity levels are staying above that critical minimum of 50%. Where some people might be battling from too low a humidity level, other people might be battling from too high a humidity level, especially in a lot of greenhouses or houses in tropical areas where the temperature outside is really warm and inside the house maybe several degrees lower, and your humidity levels then inside are going to be incredibly high. So you can get humidity levels of up to 100%. And what is going to happen is water will condense on the plant itself just about all day long. And that constant supply of water on your plant in those grooves is going to be a magnet for all sorts of diseases, especially things like botrytis, that will get in and be the end of your plant as quickly as you can imagine. So when you do have those high humidity levels like that, air movement is going to be your very, very best friend. It will help move that moisture away faster and help keep those threats at bay. We also need to understand how humidity affects your watering of Phalaenopsis. Phalaenopsis do not go through a dormant period. They generally grow all year long, which means they require moisture throughout the year. And as I said, with their large, broad leaves, they have a large area for transpiration. So they're going to transpire a lot. So they're going to need a fair amount of water in relation to other orchids, not only because of their large leaves, but also because they have no storage organ other than their leaves. They don't have any pseudobulbs that's going to help keep a store of water for them. So we're going to have to make sure they've got water all year round so they can keep healthy. And with that, the higher the humidity levels are, the less transpiration and evaporation that's going to take place. So the less often you'll need to water your orchid, because your media is going to stay moist for longer because there's not evaporation taking place from the media, and the plant itself is not absorbing as much water from the media as if you had lower humidity levels. You'd have more transpiration from the plant itself as the air was drawing moisture out of the plant, more evaporation from the media, so you'd need to water more frequently, because not only does your plant need more moisture to keep the leaves turgid in relation to that transpiration, but also the media itself is having moisture evaporated straight from it. As the temperature is lower, so you need to keep your humidity levels higher, because low temperatures with low humidity can cause cold burn on your plants. So you want to try and keep the humidity levels up, especially during those cold periods. It helps reduce the cold stress on your plant. It reduces the need for transpiration, and it reduces the evaporation from around the plant, which helps cool the environment around the plant. So for all of those factors, you want to try and keep as much humidity as possible when your temperatures are cooler. As the temperatures start getting too high over their prescribed maximum, perhaps slightly lower humidities can be helpful, especially if you've got things like evaporation trays and that around, because the evaporation from those trays, although it's then providing humidity, it also provides a cooling effect. That will help in keeping the temperatures around your orchid down. But if you've got those high temperatures and that high humidity, air movement is the only way you're going to be able to keep your orchid cool. So ensure you've got some nice, good, strong air movement going over it. That doesn't mean a whirlwind fan blowing it over, just a breeze blowing over it. Along with those temperatures, light can also be a factor. The more direct light your orchid is getting, the ambient air temperature may not get higher, but the temperature on your leaves will. And that will also cause evaporation and transpiration from your leaf. That is one of the reasons that it's always suggested, other than sunburn, that we keep our Phalaenopsis out of direct sun. The humidity in and around your plant is also going to be affected by the size pot that you're planting it in. This is also going to determine the amount of watering that's going to be needed in relation to the humidity levels. Of course, the larger pots are going to hold more moisture and are going to take longer for the moisture to be evaporated and for the plant to use it all. So they're going to have to be watered less frequently than the smaller pots. Often also smaller pots, you have younger plants in them. These younger plants and the seedlings are growing faster than what your mature plants are, and in that faster growth, they need more moisture. So they're going to be needed to be watered more frequently than what those larger, more mature plants are going to need. So it's easy to remember: fast evaporation, slower evaporation, more frequent watering, less frequent watering. And we don't really want to get to the point where our plants start to lose their turgidity in the leaves and start having fewer viable leaves before we realize that they need more water because the humidity is sucking all the moisture out of them. So that's one of the reasons that often we'll use clear pots so that we can see in to tell whether there's enough moisture in the pot for the orchid before it gets to this sort of point. Another way a lot of people do it is, if they don't have clear pots, they learn how heavy their pot gets. And that way you can start telling, okay, it's still got moisture in it, I can feel the weight as it dries out. Okay, I understand, it's feeling a bit light. I need to get that into some water as quickly as possible. Now that you understand a little bit more about humidity and some of the tips and tricks you can use to get the humidity levels to the right levels for the healthy growth of your orchids, there's no more excuses for droopy leaves. And we'd like to thank the latest 2 members in our Buy Me a Coffee community for helping our orchids grow beautifully. And remember, Ed posts a lot of orchid-related content down there. Be sure to go have a look and don't be shy. Sign up, become a member, and grow like a pro. Thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.